Good evening and welcome to another edition of Overtime here on WOTM. I'm Gerhard Mathangani with you for the next hour, along with our Wednesday buddy, Mark Everett Kelly. John joins us on Tuesdays. Mark, here on Wednesdays, we have a really special show for you, and we'll have some different outlets of how we're breaking things down here in the world of sports. We'll also, of course, talk a lot about Auburn and Alabama's basketball teams. Both had a great showing last night in SEC play. Also, we'll take a look at last week's games in the NFL and also an upcoming look at the SEC schedule coming up in just a little bit. First off, Mark, let's talk about Bama last night. They came into this game, the number 9 ranked team in the country, and played very well, sweeping Kentucky for the first time since the 1988-89 season. A nice run to end the game, 18-5. They come away with the win, 70-59. Not their normal scoring percentage, not their normal shooting game from the floor. But I tell you what, I was super impressed. I guess you were as well.
Yeah, I think the thing about Alabama is they've been able to maintain this consistency now over their first 9 games of the SEC schedule, which to me is very impressive. And it's not just the same thing that they're winning with every night. You know they're going to come after you defensively. They lead the nation, lead the conference in field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage. They're also up there in steals, turnovers forced. But they have a number of players that can get you in a number of ways. Shackelford can beat you on the boards and driving to the basket. They hang around the perimeter. Last night they didn't make that many threes. They only scored 60-something points. They held Kentucky to only 59, where it shows where when Kentucky scores over 70, they usually win. And it's the first time they beat them since 88-89 when Eddie Sutton was the head coach there. And Eddie Sutton led to Rick Pitino. And the funny thing was that in 88-89, Rick Pitino coached the New York Knicks. And
your squad, your boys. Your boys up there in New York.
Mark Jackson, Trent Tucker led them to the second round where they lost to the Bulls. And it became an annual, yearly loss to Michael Jordan in the NBA playoffs. But anyway, that's what turned their whole program around. Then Pitino came in because they were on violation. And next thing you know, they were a national power again, much like they are now. So to see Kentucky struggling a little bit with John Calipari isn't the norm. So for Alabama to beat them twice and to get the best start for them since 86-87 when Wimp Sanderson was there, this is a special team. And like Nate Oates said, they are doing things well, but they can be even better. And I think that's what he's trying to get them to accomplish is that they have a number of guys that can do a number of things. One guy I really like that's been performing well is another senior on the team, Herbert Jones, who's multidimensional. He last night 13 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists for a guy who's about 6'8". He can get after you defensively, one of the best players on the team defensively if you saw toward the end of the game, blocking shots left and right. They made their free throws down the stretch, another big thing. Joshua Primo named SEC Freshman of the Week last week. 19 points per game. He shot like 10 for 13 from 3-point range. So there are a number of players. It's not just Petty. We know Petty can beat you. Probably one of the best players in the SEC. But Shackelford, Herbert Jones, Primo, they have a lot of guys that can come at you and do a lot of different things.
No doubt. And you named it 6 for 20 from 3, but they were finding ways to get it done. As you mentioned, James Shackelford, 21 points in the matchup. He was 10 for 10 from the free throw line. And a guy you mentioned, Herbert Jones, we'll dive into his statistics a little bit more coming up in just a bit. Here's Alabama head coach Nate Oates on the win, the first one of the
veteran
top 10 team.
That know how to win or learning how to win, showing that they know how to win in tight games. You know, I think we had a 10-0 run there. They were up 2, if I remember, with, what was it, 54, 52, if I remember right. And we came out over about a 4-minute stretch there and pitched a shutout. You know, they got the free throws in that late 3. We almost shut them out in the last 4 minutes. You know, can't say enough about Herb. And then Shaq just came alive in the second half and really gave us that scoring punch we needed. And, you know, obviously his free throws he's got to figure out. Him and Herb combined to go 19 of 20 at the free throw line. That was huge for us. So big win halfway through conference at 9-0. Really proud of our guys and the culture that they've created for themselves and just winning, being able to win some close games here.
Excuse me, Mark, you're always good with the numbers. You really like Herbert Jones and what he's been able to bring to the team. This year, another incredible season.
Yeah, the senior from Greensboro, Alabama. It's funny, when I heard Greensboro, oh, that's where Forrest Gump is from. No, he's from Greensboro, Alabama, so it's a little different. I don't even know if Greensboro exists, but anyway. Herbert Jones, he does a number of things really well. He's tall, he's lengthy, he's one of the best defenders. He can look at his team ranks. He leads the team in rebounds, leads the team in assists, leads the team in blocks, leads the team in steals, and a very important statistic, leads the team in free throws made, which is down the stretch against Kentucky last night. If they didn't, they were, 7 for 7 from the free throw line?
Right.
Put that game away when you thought maybe Kentucky has a chance to make a couple threes and stay in it. They did not. They were a step up to the free throw line and make those shots. Herbert Jones is really a guy that does a lot of things really well. He complements everybody on the team, just like all these guys really work well together. They have their role, but Herbert Jones, with the other senior on the team with Petey, has a number of things that he does very well, and you look at all the categories that he leads the team in.
He reminds me of one of those guys. He is a glue guy, but he's one of the stars of the team. He does both. He's able, like you said, to be able to kind of get the team together and be able to facilitate between your perimeter guys and your guys down low. But at the same time, as you mentioned, and as these stats lay out, he is one of the stars and leaders of this team statistically.
I tell you who he reminds me a lot of is Robert Horry.
Yeah.
Because he's a guy, Horry was a guy who's 6'10", very tall, very lengthy.
Right.
And if you look, 13 for 27 from three-point range, so he doesn't take that many, but he leads the team in three-point percentage.
Right. And that's a very, very key statistic for him. And we'll be able to see if Alabama can continue this run. Right now, as you mentioned, they are now still undefeated in SEC play. We'll get to the SEC stats in just a bit. Also now 10 consecutive wins. Alabama looking pretty good early on now in this season in the SEC. Meanwhile, the Auburn Tigers really started off slow. They started with a 4-game losing streak to begin the year in conference play. However, they've picked up their pace too as well. They've got a win over Kentucky as well. And then last night, got a monster win against Missouri, the number 12 team in the nation and the number 2 team in the SEC heading into this game. Just as impressive as you were with Alabama, how have you been impressive with this Auburn kind of flourish over the last 3 weeks?
Well, the thing about Auburn is you know that they're going to come to play against ranked teams. They're 8-3 in their last 11 games under Bruce Pearl against ranked teams. So they come to play against teams when it matters. And you look at what's going on in the SEC this year. It's another weird year. You normally see Kentucky at the top. Everybody thought Tennessee was going to be the team to beat. They lost 2 games last week. So there are opportunities for other teams to step in. Missouri wasn't really kind of an afterthought when the season began. They entered the game ranked in the top 15, one of the only 2 teams ranked in the SEC. Usually you see at least 4 or 5 teams ranked in the SEC.
Right.
I think Florida will probably get in there next week, maybe Auburn too. But a guy that really has stood out for Auburn this year is freshman Sharife Cooper.
Oh, yeah, he's been outstanding.
And he's a guy that, along with another great freshman, Cameron Thomas from LSU, the only 2 freshmen in the league that have 4 games of 25 points or more, 18 for 21 from the free throw line last night.
Yeah.
A 6'1" guard from Powder Springs, Georgia. 6'1", 18 free throws made.
And he missed the first 11 games, and now here he is as a true freshman playing high school basketball last year, now one of the better players in the SEC as they move forward. With him and with this Bruce Pearl team, which is a very, very young team, do you expect this team to kind of turn that corner, so to speak, what Calipari has been able to do with his teams over the past few years? With Krzyzewski, both these guys getting these one-and-done players, so to speak, and Sharife Cooper will likely be a one-and-done player as well, one of the higher draft picks in the NBA mock drafts. Do you expect Auburn to now be one of these teams that kind of makes that leap now as these freshmen, including Sharife Cooper, get these extra games under them, extra confidence with them, and then get these games on the road, in addition to Sharife Cooper, guys like J.T. Thor and Chris Moore?
And Flanagan, too.
That's right, yeah.
He's a guy last year only averaged 3.2 points per game. This year averaging over 14 points per game, over 11 points per game from season to season. So we'll see how the schedule lines up. I think it's going to be a big game for them against Baylor. They get to play the number 2 team in the nation in the Big 12 SEC challenge this weekend. So, and going to Baylor, that's going to be a big test for them to see where they rank nationally. I think in the SEC, there's still a lot of unknown as we get into later in the year. I think their loss to Alabama, it was probably put them down a little bit because of the rivalry and everything, but they've kind of risen up since then. And getting Cooper now above back, 6 games, only 6 games. They're 4-2 in in those 6 games.
Right.
He seems to complement everybody really well.
Yeah.
And for a guy, a 6'1" guard, to be able to do that and let everyone else kind of fill their roles, he can take care of the scoring role. He penetrates well, gets to the free throw line, is able to kick the ball out, leads the team in assists as well. So he does a number of things really well that'll add to them getting better as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think so as well. And Auburn, as of right now, one of the top 7 teams in the SEC. Alabama still holding standing at number 1 at that 9-0 overall, then followed by LSU and Tennessee. Also, Florida is at 5-3, Missouri at 4-3. Kentucky as well as Auburn. And so you have a situation here where Alabama is starting to separate itself as far as the overall wins and losses, but I think a lot of teams are dangerous, Auburn included. Kentucky, you never can count them out. Missouri, one of the top 15 teams before yesterday's game as well. I think the SEC should be really fun, especially at the top.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend you have LSU taking on Texas Tech,
Right.
number 10 in the
Alabama
nation.
and Oklahoma.
Alabama and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, top 25 team. You have Tennessee taking on Kansas, which is another top-ranked team. So you got a lot of great matchups this weekend.
Yeah, it should be a really, really fun weekend. In SEC basketball, as like you said, most teams in the league going over to the Big 12 and playing in Big 12 competition. That should be an interesting litmus test for a lot of schools, Auburn and Alabama included. Coming up next here on Overtime, Tennessee has a new athletic director and a new football coach. We'll introduce them both coming up next. Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. We will move from college basketball to college football. Tennessee obviously made a big splash last week as they fired head coach Jeremy Pruitt amid a lot of investigations. Still a lot to uncover there. However, we do have a new AD in Knoxville as well as a new head coach, and they both come from the same school previously. The University of Central Florida, Mark, hiring the new AD, Danny White, to lead the Vols athletic program, and then he goes right back to the Florida area, goes back to Central Florida, and goes and picks up his head coach in Josh Heupel. We'll talk about the AD decision in just a bit, but first, your overall thoughts of Josh Heupel, the former Oklahoma quarterback, now serving as a new head coach in SEC country.
Yeah, well, I mean, he started off great at Central Florida, 12-1 his first season, 10-3 his second year, and kind of struggled a little bit this year. You see how he's developed a quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. He's had a great year, 32 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And Heupel also won a national championship with Oklahoma in 2000, throwing 30 touchdown passes. And, I mean, he was a guy that fit kind of awkward player.
Right.
But he had his niche, and I think he's able to communicate with his players well. Central Florida isn't a job where you go and you can't win now. You have to perform there.
That's right.
So he was under a certain amount of pressure there to win. He did, but we're talking about a whole new ball game here in the SEC.
Right, and you talked about not only the new ball game in the recruiting standpoint, but also, I mean, he's coming in with kind of a foot in the sand, so to speak, about 2 feet in the sand, because we don't even know. We don't know what's going to happen with the sanctions that will come down with the NCAA, and on top of that, what Tennessee might self-impose. How excited, number one, should Tennessee fans be, and then how patient should they be, realistically, knowing that you do have a coach, but also not knowing what is to come?
Yeah, I think you just don't know, because Tennessee fans have really suffered since they had the Philip Fulmer years. Okay, but you have to be able to recruit in the SEC, and a lot of these teams figure they see Alabama top 5 every year. They're getting all these 5-star athletes. They got to figure, okay, if I'm going to compete, I got to do what they do. So it leads to maybe breaking something here, breaking something there, and figure how can I get these guys how can I compete if I can't get top recruits?
Right.
So it's a tough job. It's a tough spot to be in. You're going to find out. Lane Kiffin was at Tennessee. He left. He's going to have to do that again at Ole Miss. You see, a lot of guys, these coaches. When Pruitt came over, he left Alabama. He was a guy that figured could turn the program around. And essentially coming into this year, many thought he did.
Right.
And then all of a sudden at halftime against Georgia, something happened. And they just, after starting to get the season with 2 wins, they lost 7 of the last 8. And next thing you know, he's got these recruiting violations, and a guy who at the beginning of the year had such promise. And if you ask Tennessee fans, this guy was going to be the next Phil Fulmer, who's going to lead us back to the promised land, SEC championships coming our way. And then all of a sudden he's done, and you got another guy coming in.
Yeah, Tennessee's job is really interesting because when they are humming, they're in a really good spot. They're a little bit like Notre Dame. It's like they can recruit, and they can recruit nationally. They are good in that sense. However, they need to get the right guy in the right spot. They think they have it in Josh Heupel. Here was the message to his fans and the team as they move forward, as Mark said, kind of in uncharted waters, not knowing what's ahead for the program in Knoxville.
Everybody's got a different perspective based on their background of what a family is at times. When you sit in front of your team and there's 105 guys, in front of you, everybody's got a little bit different perspective. But at the end of the day, a family to me is defined when push comes to shove, that family stays together. Let's stay a family. Let's trust the people that are in place to help you become what you're capable of. You chose this university for the right reasons, and I'm saying it has a chance to be an elite football program. The tradition says that it should be. It's our job to get it back to that level. You're going to get an elite education and be in one of the best communities in college football.
So you heard it there, Mark, where he's talking about trying to stay together, stay as a family. But I think he knows that it can get unraveled in a bit because the expectations were so high after last year. They ended the season really well. And then you mentioned they started the first 2 games of this season really well. Halftime against Georgia, the wheels fell off. They were never able to recover. How important was this hire for Danny White, and how much do you think Danny White needs to be able to give Heupel, knowing that they do have that background together, as they move forward together? And what is realistic in order to get Tennessee back to where they're competing for the SEC East?
Well, here's the thing. You have a bit of a break in the SEC East because although the competition is really strong in Georgia and Florida, it's just 2 teams. In the West, you got to worry about Alabama. You got to worry about Auburn every other year. You got to worry about LSU. Now you got to worry about Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, and then you have Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. So there's a lot of more competition, I believe, in the West. And if you look at how the West has dominated the East since Missouri and Texas A&M joined the SEC in 2012, we're talking about over 60% of the games that they've played against each other, the West has won, plus all the national championships, all the 8-1 in SEC championship games. So they're really dominant is in the West. So you have a chance if you can beat Georgia and you can beat Florida or split with them and then take care of the rest with South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt. They never seem to take that next step. South Carolina, for a couple years when the old ball coach was there, and they were recruiting great, and they had like Jadavian and Clowney and guys like that, but they can never get over the hump. Only won 1 SEC East title. So it's either Florida or Georgia every year. There shouldn't be any reason why they can't compete for an East title with those 2 teams. I think they can recruit with them and compete with them because, like you said, great stadium, great campus, great history. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to at least get the kind of players to compete in the East. I think so, too. And I think the only hesitation would be the sanctions. But I think once that gets cleared up, I mean, let's call it 2 years. Let's call it 2-year bowl ban or a 1-year bowl ban. Well, then I think you're in a good position because then you go into it knowing what's to lay ahead. So this year you can hit the transfer portal really hard, and then maybe next year go after some of the guys that will be a part of the program that you want to build up. And he's a quarterback guy as well. He was on the staff that when Sam Bradford won the Heisman Trophy, he won a Heisman Trophy himself. So he's a quarterback whisperer, so to speak. I think the defense will have its hands full with Tennessee when they are humming. And I think Heupel can be the guy to get them there in a couple of years. Meanwhile, Danny White, the AD for Tennessee, talked about the search and being able to land on his guy, Josh Heupel, the new head coach over in Tennessee.
I did not expect to hire Josh Heupel, not because I don't think he's one heck of a football coach. I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't think that. But I really didn't want to do that to UCF. And I'm going to have I know I have some people mad at me right now. I love y'all, I promise. I love UCF, and I want the very best for that place that's been so good to me and my family, and I love the people there. But searches are fluid, and you need to take all the information you can. And as I said last week, I am far from the smartest person in the room, but I was extremely close to this, and I'm moderately intelligent, and I worked really hard to make the best decision that I think is in the best interest of Tennessee.
So the White Heupel regime will start in Knoxville immediately. Coming up next here on Overtime, we will talk NFL football. Championship weekend is in the books. Super Bowl 55 is now set down for Tampa. Mark and I will discuss it coming up next. Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. The Chiefs and the Bucks, those are the two teams that will play down in Tampa at Raymond James Stadium for Super Bowl 55, a unique situation, obviously, this year with the Super Bowl and with the coronavirus, obviously a limited crowd down there in Florida. But, Mark, we have a situation where we have a really interesting dynamic, really interesting storyline between two quarterbacks that you would figure are going to the Hall of Fame. One on the front end of his career, one on the back end of his career, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. First off, before we get to that game, the Super Bowl, let's talk about championship weekend. The Bucks obviously knocking off Green Bay on the road, and the Chiefs getting the win over the Bills at home at Arrowhead Stadium. The two teams that are now in Super Bowl Sunday coming up next week. What were some of your thoughts about championship weekend?
I thought in Kansas City, you have Buffalo scoring the first, 2 touchdowns, getting up to, jumping off to an early 9-0.
Right.
And Kansas City was able to come back and really dominate the second half and show that they were the better team, because Buffalo, they surprised people all year. And Kansas City was able to take their hit. They were able to hold Josh Allen, which is kind of the offensive weapon that Mahomes is.
Right.
It's just that he's not as consistent completing passes, at least not until this year.
Right.
So there were a lot of similarities between the two. And Allen did a lot of good things all year. But when it comes down to making plays, Mahomes has the ability to get outside the pocket. He reads the defense very well. He doesn't make many mistakes. He doesn't throw many picks.
Right.
He doesn't throw many incompletions.
Yeah.
And his athletic ability is so freakish. I remember one game where he threw the ball left-handed. It was a Monday night game against Denver. He can just create plays and do things that come out of his creativity. He's very creative, like a little bit different than Lamar Jackson because he's bigger, and he's, believe it or not, I think he's a better athlete than Lamar Jackson, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember his dad was a great pitcher, well, not a great pitcher, but he was on the 1999 Mets where you went 7-0 for the year.
Right.
But he was a tall, lanky guy. You looked at him and said, wow, this guy should be a basketball player, a football player, just a great athlete.
Right.
And here comes Mahomes, and he's pretty much changed what the future of the NFL quarterback is going to be.
Right.
You look at guys like Deshaun Watson. I talked about Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. There are a lot of guys that are coming into that mold of being able to run the option. Russell Wilson started it.
Right.
And be able to throw for a lot of yards, run for a lot of yards, have a dynamic offense. Look at what Eric Bieniemy has done with this offense. The fact that he isn't getting a head coaching job is really shocking a little bit. But I think they played like you expected them to. They're going back to the Super Bowl. As far as the Bucks, looking at the Bucks and the Packers, 28-10 they were leading.
Right.
And I had memories of the 2006 AFC Championship game where Brady held an 18-point lead against Manning. Yeah. And Manning came back and won his first Super Bowl. For a little while, I thought that the Packers were going to be able to do that. But Tampa Bay's defense really stepped up when Brady threw picks on 3 straight possessions. You normally don't see him do that.
You hardly ever see that, especially in the playoffs.
Right, but he played so well early in the game just to get back to the Super Bowl with all the chaos and everything, COVID, new coach, new team. And you still saw one thing, at 43, there was a time when he had to zip the ball in. There were a couple times when he really zipped that thing in there at 43.
Yeah, you could tell his arm is still there.
Absolutely.
And even in a cold weather place like Lambeau Field, it wasn't snowing. It wasn't the normal temperatures we see in a January, but the Lambeau conditions obviously was really cold. That he's used to it, Gronk's used to it, the rest of the team not so much. But as they go forward, it'll be an interesting quarterback matchup between these two teams. One of the things that you're always good at is digging these numbers up and talking about how these teams and players stack up against one another as they go into this game. Obviously, everybody knows all the accolades about Brady, playing in his 10th Super Bowl, trying to win another one, and then Patrick Mahomes is now the new guy that is coming up. Now Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady will play against one another going into this year and going into this Super Bowl. One of the things that you dug up was the first 7 years of a playoff career and those rankings and some interesting statistics between these two players. It was a different dynamic, I think, for Brady because he wasn't asked to win the game a lot of times, especially early on. Patrick Mahomes has been. That's why Mahomes' numbers are a lot more as far as the overall passing yards. However, Brady won those 2 Super Bowls in the first 7 years. Patrick Mahomes can win a second one coming up this year as well. What are some of your thoughts as you break down these two players, especially with Mahomes maybe being what we would think is the next GOAT?
Well, I think who else can you compare him to? Right. I mean, you have Brady won his first 9 games, which included 3 Super Bowls. Yeah. Mahomes has a chance to get and win his second Super Bowl. Russell Wilson had a chance to win his second Super Bowl, except he forgot to run the ball at the 1-yard line with Marshawn Lynch. You saw Roethlisberger got to the Super Bowl in his second year, winning it 3 games on the road like Brady did this year. And Aaron Rodgers is a guy that usually gets compared to one of the best quarterbacks in the game today. So you look at how Mahomes compares to those guys, over 2,000 passing yards more than anybody, and chance to win his second Super Bowl already, and he's under 25 years old. You look at guys over career guys, Hall of Famers, guys, legends like Joe Montana. Montana went 6-1 in his first 7 playoff games, and then he wound up winning. That was a championship game. Wound up getting to the Super Bowl later that year, and he beat the Bengals for the second time. Right. So that was his second Super Bowl. They beat the Bears in his championship game in 1988. So he started off 7-1 in his first 8 games with 2 Super Bowls. Wound up winning 3 Super Bowls with the 49ers. Actually, 4 Super Bowls with the 49ers. Right. So there are a lot of things that he did that you can maybe draw more to Brady even. All 3 of them are really similar. And Mahomes, you look at his ability to really not only change what's going on now, but rank up there with guys all time. Troy Aikman's another guy that did really good his first 7 games. So Mahomes is in really good company. Yeah, certainly is, and he can add another Super Bowl to that and another impressive performance in the Super Bowl game. His numbers can go up even more. I think you touched on a great point. I think he's changed the quarterback position. We've seen this in sports a lot. You see it with Steph Curry in the now 3-point centric game of the NBA. Absolutely. And now you're seeing with Patrick Mahomes, can you run it? Can you throw it? Can you be dynamic at both? He certainly has done so. But in order to get that second Super Bowl, he's got to go through the GOAT. That's Tom Brady. That game coming up in the first Sunday coming up in February. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we have a special treat for you. Mark and I will be joined by a couple of our buddies from the Big Apple. We will talk the NFC Championship game and preview the Super Bowl coming up next. Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. Coming up here in our next segment, we have a very special segment for you. We have our friend Mark. He's a native New Yorker down here in Alabama. He's helped out with our show for the last few months now. I'm really doing a good job breaking everything down. Former researcher at ESPN, breaks down all the numbers, does a great job for us on Wednesdays. However, as we said, comes from New York, the media capital of the world. Yeah. And you got a couple of your buddies to come on with us, and we had a little Zoom call earlier and talking about this game and their company. Introduce us to your buddies and the people that they'll see here down south in Alabama, 2 of your good friends from New York. Yeah, trying to fit in with the rest of us. Sometimes I feel like a square peg in a round hole. But I think that getting a little perspective nationally, at least, how they see the Super Bowl. I know pro football is a lot different than college football up there. So we have Errol Marks, which is the owner of Worldwide Sports Radio. They do internet radio, and there's co-hosts on the show that they do Down to the Wire on Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern Time. They come on and kind of gave their perspective. Errol and I had a little bit of a rivalry because we like to go at it and argue with each other. Right. We had a discussion and a disagreement about, is Tom Brady the greatest quarterback ever to play? I thought he was. I wrote an article about it that's on our website, which details a lot of his statistics and why I felt that way. You can find that discussion online on YouTube as well. But we kind of wanted to get their perspective. Now that Brady went back to the Super Bowl, something that he said, it'll never happen. Brady will never get there with Tampa Bay. He's going to lose. So we just wanted to see what Errol thought and what Speedy Petey thought coming out of the game against Green Bay. It was a really different dynamic. It was a cool dynamic on YouTube, and another great time meeting those guys today. We want to introduce you to both Kyle and Errol. Today we have a special treat. Some guys from my hometown back in New York on Long Island. We have Kyle Kloiber, we know him as Speedy, and Errol Marks from Worldwide Sports Radio. You can find them on worldwidesportsradio.com. They have podcasts. They do live internet streaming. There's great sports articles. There's a bunch of stuff going on there every day. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on Facebook. And Errol and I go back a little while, and same thing with Speedy. So we just wanted to bring in kind of another voice here and give you another part of the country and how things are going, what their view of the Super Bowl is, what their view maybe is of college football and some of the other things going on in the world. So for those of you who don't know, Errol and I had a little debate before the season about if Tom Brady was the greatest quarterback or not. I had written an article that expressed that not only did I think he was the greatest quarterback, but he was the greatest athlete to ever play any sport. And that's simply just because of the numbers he's put up, the fact that he, even before the season, been in 9 Super Bowls, he's won 30, at that time, 30 playoff games, just so many records that were not even close. The statistics in his 40s through his 20s. So it was a great debate that we had where you can find on YouTube. But I just want to introduce these guys. We got Speedy, Kyle Kloiber, and Errol Marks. How you guys doing today?
Hi, man. I'm excited for my, I guess, Southern debut for this,
There you go.
this audience from Alabama and wherever else you guys might have a following. I'm very excited to be here, and you're going to get a big taste of mine and Errol's craziness, that's for sure.
So let's get to the Super Bowl, Errol. So with Tom Brady, I know you didn't think you would make it with Tampa Bay. You thought that Tampa Bay didn't either have the talent or was in a tougher division. So were you impressed by Brady's ability to get there? And has your opinion changed at all?
No, it hasn't changed. Listen, I will say this. Tom Brady, for some reason, has this knack. It doesn't matter where he's playing or where he goes. He has a knack of finding a way to win. There's no question that he does. I think he's a very lucky player. Now, I don't think he has a lack of talent. I think he's a top 5 quarterback of all time. There's no question that he is. If Tom Brady, and I said this on my show, if Tom Brady somehow wins the Super Bowl this year, I can't argue that he isn't a top 2, top 3 quarterback of all time. And the reason why is when you win, you're in 10 Super Bowls and you win 7 out of the 10, you can't argue that. Now, I think football is the ultimate team sport. We all know what Bill Belichick is as a head coach. We know what he drives as a personality. Tom Brady has his own personality. So there's no argument that Tom Brady isn't a great player. But if you watched Tampa against the Saints, I mean, are you blinded to see that Tom Brady didn't have a good game? Did you watch the game when the last game against the Green Bay Packers? Did Tom Brady have a good game? 280 yards, 3 interceptions, and a couple of touchdowns. The couple of touchdowns that he scored was really on bad play calling and really bad defense. Aaron Rodgers lost that game. He lost that game for Green Bay because he could have made so many plays at the end of the game that could have kept them even into the game where I thought in the fourth quarter they would have had a chance to win. The coaching was terrible. It was horrendous. And you saw that in the fourth quarter with the Green Bay Packers. And I'm not going to say anything about Matt LaFleur. I think Matt LaFleur he's a good offensive-minded coach, but all-around coach, I just don't think he's that good of a coach. But what really won that game against the Green Bay Packers was JPP and Barrett. Those 2 guys were dominating the line of scrimmage in the fourth quarter. They looked hungry, and you saw it. Is it because of Tom Brady why they're going to the Super Bowl? He made plays when he had to, and Aaron Rodgers couldn't. That was the difference of the game and the defense.
What do you think of our discussion, and where do you put Brady on your list?
I have him number 2. I have him right after Montana. I always like to separate quarterbacks in terms of different accomplishments versus statistical prowess and how they change the game. Because Dan Marino, I think, is the best statistical quarterback you'll ever see, except he's never won a Super Bowl, so you can't put him number 1 if you want to judge accomplishments. In terms of Brady, he has a little bit of both, which could definitely get him at the end of his career to the best. He's pretty close to Montana as it is now, and he could definitely win. But like Errol was saying, he's helped out a lot by Bruce Arians, a great offensive mind. Evans, Godwin, there's a lot of talent on this team. Now, I was skeptical at first in the playoffs too, because I actually thought this was going to be a redemption year for the Saints. All the hypes on Tampa, the home stadium. I mean, wouldn't it see like the Saints could play a home Super Bowl, an enemy Super Bowl in Tampa? Right. I was thinking that's exactly what was going to happen this year. And the Saints blew their chance. They made a lot of mistakes in that game. And like Errol was saying, Brady didn't play well. Brady played well against the Packers. I give him a lot of credit for some of the throws he did make. I think the 3rd interception was completely on him. That was like a Jay Cutler-esque throw. That was really bad.
But there's a name for you.
Yeah. So I don't think they were all on him. I think he played well. I don't think he was the best player in that game, but I did think he played well. And again, I still think he has a chance because of his longevity to get there. I would still put him number 2 at the moment, but he played well in that particular game against the Packers. The Packers blew it in their own ways too. And I will disagree with Errol in the sense where I think Matt LaFleur does deserve a little more blame. I didn't like the play calling. Everyone's blaming him for the field goal. The bigger problem on that drive, too, was the clock management. And also Aaron Rodgers. He played well in that game, but at the end of the game, he had 2 chances, 2nd and goal and 3rd and goal, where he could have ran it in easily and did not do that.
Errol, why don't you tell us a little bit about your show and a little more about the network?
Well, we've been around for about 7 years. We're a digital profile radio station. We're a live radio station. We're not a podcast. You can actually hear the replays by going to our app. You go to, if you have iOS, you go to WWSRN, or you can go to Android, Worldwide Sports Radio Network, and you can find us. You can download some of our shows. You can watch our shows and listen to our shows live on our app. Our website, www.worldwidesportsradio.com. We have a great website for all the fans to check out and really stay in tune to what we're doing, the events that we do, some of the broadcasts that we do around the country. So we've been doing this a long time. And as everybody knows, or if you don't know us, we are a crazy radio station. We love talking sports. We give our good insights, not only with sports, but our attitudes and our personalities too. I think the one thing that I look at with sports radio is you have to bring out personality. You could talk about everything that you want to talk about. Everybody talks about sports. You know, everybody has their own radio podcasts and stuff like that. It's how you deliver it. And I think what we do in a professional but analytic and comedy kind of way is we give you a different outlook to where sports is driven not only from the New York fan, but the worldwide fan. So that's what we do. And we like to entertain people. And I'm telling you right now, we will entertain you guys. That's for sure.
And I don't think that was any lie. I think they are super entertaining. You have a big background with them as well. Your thoughts on Errol and Kyle's takes, and the fact that they still have one more game left, and we'll talk about their Super Bowl picks here in a little bit. Yeah,
well, I think when you deal with Errol, it's hard to get a word in. People could say the same thing about me, but we went back and forth, and I mean, it got pretty heated because. Like anything, I base things on statistics. I don't let my personal feelings get involved, and I can't because that's you're supposed to be neutral. Right. So when I look at the numbers tell me one thing very clearly, that no one else has ever played a quarterback like he has, which makes him not only the greatest quarterback ever, but the greatest player to play any sport. When you look at what he's still doing in his 40s, no other athlete has ever done that.
Yeah, exactly. And Monday nights, 6 to 8 o'clock Eastern time, so 5 to 7 o'clock here. Be able to catch all their stuff. They do great work, and we look forward to reconnecting with both Kyle and Errol here in the very near future. Coming up next here on Overtime, we will talk SEC football. The schedules are out for 2021. Really interesting things that are on tap for Auburn, Alabama, and the rest of the league. We'll talk about that and more next year on Overtime. Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. The SEC League office has got all the SEC football fans ready for next season. They put out the entire schedule for the 2021 campaign. Obviously, interesting storylines between Alabama and Auburn. Alabama, of course, coming off the first year ever and possibly the only year, a full SEC schedule, 10 SEC conference games. And now we're in a situation where they are now playing a regular 12-game schedule market, and we're now in a situation where you get some non-conference games in the mix as well. As you take a look at what both Alabama and Auburn have to look forward to this season, what kind of stands out to you? We'll start off with the Crimson Tide.
At Florida, September 18th. They have a great win streak against the SEC East. I think they've won 32 straight games against the SEC East. Mm-hmm. They've absolutely dominated them in the era of Saban. So that's going to be a big game early. How they play against Miami? Look, the ACC needs another team to step up. Yeah, because it's Miami. Clemson and nobody else. Right. So can Miami be that team? They're obviously, I don't think they're going to win against Alabama, but even staying within, say, 30 against Alabama would at least show something. You look at they host Ole Miss, the great game last year at Ole Miss, which really scared Alabama fans early on because they couldn't stop anybody. At Texas A&M, that could decide the West, depending on how Texas A&M comes back off of 8-1, disappointing. They didn't make the college football playoff.
And replacing their quarterback.
Yeah, and replacing their quarterback. They look toward this year to where they could have a chance against Alabama. It didn't work out that way because of COVID, so we'll see where they are next year. Maybe they missed their chance, maybe not. But if they can somehow beat Alabama there, they will take over maybe as a favorite to win the West, which until Alabama gets knocked off, they are the unrivaled favorite in the West. and at Auburn, which is always a problem for them. And LSU, they get it home this year.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting dynamic because you got that LSU game back in its regular spot. You got the Auburn game back in its spot, this time over in Auburn. Auburn getting what we would hope is the back-to-back full crowds because you had it pre-COVID, and maybe now that the vaccines are in mass distribution across the United States. Meanwhile, for Auburn, they will start off their year against Akron, but then also they'll have a marquee non-conference game. Bama plays Miami at a neutral site. Auburn goes to Penn State. What are some of the things that kind of catch your eye as you look at Auburn's slate this year?
Yeah, at Penn State, that's going to be, Big Ten. Can the Big Ten catch up to the SEC? They've been trying to for years. Ohio State obviously wasn't on Alabama's level this year. So that's going to be another chance for them to get there. Here's the thing I don't like about the SEC schedule is the common opponents that you play from the other division.
Right.
So that only leaves you with one rotating game every year in the opposite division. So if you're Tennessee and you got to play Alabama every year, that stinks for them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if you're South Carolina and you're playing, I believe it's Arkansas every year, or Texas A&M every year, each team has a common opponent that they play every year. LSU gets Florida every year, so even for them, it's a lot harder than say playing Vanderbilt. Okay, so I don't like that. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the common opponent from the other division. Obviously, your own division you got to play every year, but they should rotate both games every year, and you would get more matchups. You would have Alabama playing Georgia more, Alabama playing Florida more.
And Nick Saban's been a component about, hey, let's keep it. Let's keep the constant game, but then have two rotating games in. That way you're playing 9 conference games instead of the 8 conference games. That way you take away, like in this situation, you take away the Akron game maybe, or you take away the game later in the year, which is maybe like a New Mexico State in Alabama's case, or Georgia State in Auburn's case this year. It's a really interesting storyline with the SEC. They will go back to what they have been going to before then. However, there are a lot of great non-conference games on the slate, especially early on. We missed this in the COVID year because everybody went to a all SEC, all ACC, all Big Ten schedule. But now we have some really interesting games to start off the year. And how about the first week of September, Georgia and Clemson, those two teams battling out where the Charlotte Panthers play. Should be a great game, and along with just a myriad of good non-conference games in the league.
Well, I think if you're the SEC, you have a reputation to uphold here. Okay, you can't go out and lose to Colorado if you're Texas A&M. You certainly can't lose to Pittsburgh if you're Tennessee. An ACC school that really is a mediocre. Same thing with NC State. NC State every year 4-4, 5-4. Basically they play to exist. So there's really not much for those teams to shoot for other than like an average bowl. Okay. So if you're Mississippi State, you got off to a slow start this year under a new coach. They're probably not going to compete that much in the West, but at least it's a chance to separate yourself nationally from some of the other conferences. Georgia, they need to get back kind of to where they were last year when they lost to Alabama. That was a big loss for them. And I think if they would have figured their quarterback problem out a little earlier, maybe they would have competed more in that game. But that kind of set them up early. They were done for the rest of the year. Then they wound up losing to Florida. They need to come back and show that they can compete. Now, Liberty at Ole Miss. Okay, why is that a big deal?
That's interesting because you got Hugh
Freeze.
Yeah, coming back to Ole Miss.
I'm sure they're not going to be welcoming him with open arms after he left them high and dry. Now that they got the new guy, Lane Kiffin, there. But he really has turned around the Liberty's program.
Exactly. And the battle of the smart teams. How about Stanford and Vanderbilt hooking up? You don't really see a lot of SEC Pac-12 games on the
They're just going to study before the game.
December 4th is the championship game back in Atlanta. Well, coming up next here in Overtime, we will close up shop here on our program, and we will say goodbye for this week and our final thoughts. Closing up shop here on Overtime, a very special thank you to Mark as well as Kyle and Errol. We'll hope to see them again in the very near future, as well as predictions for the Super Bowl. That comes your way next week. Mark's in town next Wednesday. John's back next Tuesday. That is it for us this week. You have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.